First light in Tel Aviv on the day that 2 years of waiting ended for Israel. On the beach, a tribute to Donald Trump, hoping maybe he'd see it as he flew in. Hostage Square in the city centre has been the heartbeat of 2 years of campaigning for the release of the hostages. For the people here, the last few hours of a long wait went by very slowly, and then it started. In Gaza City, Elkanah Bobot was given a phone to call home. His family could see the Hamas guard right behind him. Outside, Hamas was back on the streets to clear the way for the International Red Cross to take the hostages on the first stage of their journey back to Israel. Hamas took the hostages to use as a weapon against Israel, but they had become a liability. Their presence did not stop Israel's offensive, and huge destruction and death in Gaza. The war could not end until the hostages were free. 50 miles north in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, the tension broke. The news that they were on the move out of Gaza and away from Hamas was enough. It was a moment of release for the people waiting and watching, as well as for the men being driven out of Gaza. The crowd followed every moment on a big screen. The first 7 hostages are now out. There's a real sense of expectation. They're expecting the next batch in about an hour. The International Red Cross handed the hostages over to the Israeli military, the IDF. Lishai Miran was watching on TV. It was her husband Omri, a 48-year-old father of 2 from Kibbutz Nachal Oz. Then the family and friends of Matan Angrest, a 22-year-old soldier, saw him. Hostages previously released say he was badly hurt by Hamas during violent interrogations. And then they were back in Israel. 25-year-old Matan Zangauka was reunited with his mother, Einav. My hero, she said. A quarter of the 400 residents of their kibbutz near Oz were killed or taken hostage on the 7th of October. 23-year-old Bar Cooperstein's mother, Julie, last saw him before he went to work as a security guard at the Nova Music Festival, where almost 400 people were killed. His father, Tal, had to stand up on this day of all days. In Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, they were watching everything, glued to the big screen, and some wondering why there was no deal last year. Gil Dickman blames Israel's prime minister.
My cousin Kamel Gat was kidnapped on October 7th, and she was murdered after 328 days in captivity. She was kept in a tunnel, and her captors just shot her when the IDF was approaching because they thought they were trying to release her. And she was murdered alongside 5 other hostages in Rafah at the end of August 2024.
I've seen Netanyahu's speeches. He says, my strategy worked.
Yeah, he always said that, right? He always says that his strategy works. Even when hostages are killed, he's saying his strategy works. Okay, 42 hostages were murdered in captivity. Does that mean that his strategy worked? I don't think so.
Aviva Siegel was a hostage released in the first ceasefire 2 months into the war. When she was freed, Hamas kept her husband Keith.
I'm exploding with joy for the families, for them to get out. I was there, I touched death, and I went through the worst time that any person should ever go through for 51 days. Keith, my husband, was there for 484 days, hidden, starved. He came back like a skeleton. He wasn't treated like a person.
You feeling good about the future, the day after, once, this is a joyful day, but what happens next?
Keith and I are going to start to live. We're going to start smiling. We're going to start enjoying life because the last 2 years we haven't.
Palestinian prisoners were released by Israel as soon as its hostages were safe. These came back to Khan Yunis in Gaza. Palestinians see prisoners of the Israelis as national heroes, and they were given a hero's welcome. But their reception also showed relief that it is safe now to gather in big crowds in Gaza. and hope, as strong as people feel in Israel, that the ceasefire can become permanent. Some of the former prisoners started their family reunions before they'd even got off the bus. And while all that was happening, Donald Trump, who's become a national hero for Israelis, landed in Tel Aviv. All smiles now, but just over a month ago, Trump lost patience with Benjamin Netanyahu after he ordered a strike on Qatar, one of America's key Arab allies. The missiles missed their target, the Hamas leadership, but after that, Trump decided it was no longer in America's interests to back Netanyahu's determination to fight on. They drove together in the American presidential limousine to Israel's parliament in Jerusalem. This was a lap of honor for Donald Trump, for the hostage deal and ceasefire a genuine diplomatic triumph.
Donald Trump is the greatest friend that the state of Israel has ever had in the White House.
He had a different message for allies. The UK is one who condemned Israel and recognized Palestine as evidence of Israeli war crimes in Gaza accumulated.
More and more governments bought into Hamas's false propaganda. More and more governments succumbed to anti-Semitic mobs in their own countries. They just turned on Israel.
Two MPs were ejected when they interrupted Trump to demand a Palestinian state. A vague aspiration for one is in the Gaza deal. He didn't mention it as he reassured Israelis.
Gaza will be immediately demilitarized, that Hamas will be disarmed, and Israel's security will no longer be threatened in any way, shape, or form.
But that job has barely started. Donald Trump moved quickly on to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for a whistle-stop peace summit. The Gaza deal was a joint effort. Many of the leaders who came to Sharm had vital roles. But it is a ceasefire, an exchange of hostages for prisoners. It is not peace. Hours after Israel's hostages were reunited with their families, a few hundred people stayed in their square in Tel Aviv. The yellow ribbons, symbols of return, were still there, and the people seemed reluctant to let go of a momentous day. There was hope here today in this square, and joy, and the same for Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank who are fed up with war. But this is a conflict with very deep roots, and relief will collide with reality. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Tel Aviv.